I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods 10 to the Sky. Yes, just in time for allergy season, the bee mod, productive bees to be exact, and today I want to jump into productive bees here in my All the Mods 10 to the Sky world, or at least get this started. Now, I am actually going to be doing the bees on the very top of this tower, and I have a ton of space in here to be able to do bees. So today I'm going to be guiding all the way through getting started to how we actually automate productive bees and how we actually manage genes. There's going to be a lot of stuff in today's episode, so I hope you're strapped in and ready to go. Okay, hear me out. Since we're getting into bees today, what's your favorite productive bee? Let me know down in the comments below. All right, let's get on with this video. So just a heads up, last episode, in case you missed that episode, we automated this. Yes, just dire things. And we automated the time wand. And so I have time crystals constantly being looped between 3 different dimensions. We set that all up last episode. And that is supplying this setup over here, which is automated time fluid, all of which I got set up last episode. And my AE terminal with an export card is exporting to this slot right here, which is going to keep my time wand constantly filled up with time fluid, which is essentially an unlimited time in the bottle, in which we now have both. Now, the area you see right here is not going to be all of the bee area. No. Behind this wall, I am going to do some converting of this area to support bees. And there is a ton of space here for not only just bee production, but plenty of other things that I actually plan on doing in this series. So, yeah, just keep in mind this area is going to be opening up very, very soon. But first, we need to figure out, how do we even get bees in this pack? And how do we also get a bee hive in this pack? Well, bees are pretty easy. We can actually obtain bees by just buying them from the market stall. Like, remember this guy right here? Yeah, we can just simply buy bees. And we can buy their spawn eggs, which is pretty nice. This is going to allow us to get started, but we can't use bees unless we have a bee hive. And we can't just buy the beehive from here. There is, however, a couple of methods you can use to potentially get a beehive. And one of those ways is by potentially getting it from a quest. Now, I do happen to have a hive, and so I must have at some point gotten a hive from a quest, because I didn't actually seek out to get one of these. But if you don't have yourself a regular hive, and I do recommend having more than one hive to get started, you can just grow a hive. And this is just a regular vanilla mechanic, by the way. You need to have a flower placed within 2 blocks of a sapling. And I do recommend birch saplings so they don't grow into massive trees. And you just continue growing a tree, just like so, until a beehive spawns. And it is a 5% chance, by the way, for a beehive to spawn on the side of this tree. So if anything, you're going to be doing this, I mean, maybe 20 times, not even, before you actually get yourself a beehive. Oh, and apparently cherry trees also work. I almost forgot to mention cherry trees. So yeah, oak, spruce, or oak and birch and cherry trees. And after several trees, I now have myself a bee nest. Not exactly a hive, but it is a nest, and we can use this nest early on. The bee will go in and out and will eventually generate me some honeycombs. And I can just leave it right here, but I actually might go ahead and fence it in just a little bit to make sure these bees don't try to wander off anywhere. So for the early game, something like this will work. We have a double door system here, so I can walk in, shut the door to make sure bees don't escape. And this is another thing, we can actually tick accelerate to make the bees pop back out quicker. However, I don't believe I can accelerate the bees. Yes, I can't make them work any faster. So just having more of them is probably going to be the best option. And we can just throw a couple more in here for right now. The goal, though, is to get a campfire under here. So possibly moving this and not getting these bees to sting me would be a good idea. Possibly not even having it in front of the door. I need to get a campfire here, and we also have to be very careful because bees will actually off themselves, unfortunately, into campfires. So let's see if I can get this in here, something like this, and then we can put a trapdoor right here, just to make sure these bees are extra safe. Nice. And once we get a little bit of honey in here, I can grab out some honeycombs, and before long, we are going to be progressing pretty quick. We just got to get those first initial honeycombs, and once we have those, we can actually start upgrading things immediately into productive beehives. And looky there, before the sun even sets, I have myself 3 honeycombs. Look at that. Now, if this works for you, I mean, this honestly, I've generated like 9 honeycombs in a pretty short period of time with just this beehive. But if you actually want to just rush bees, it might be best just to do mystical agriculture seeds. And once we have at least one of these seeds, we can infinitely make more seeds, and it's probably going to be a good thing to have up and running. Honestly, productive bees requires treats, and these treats can be kind of expensive and also kind of a pain to craft. So having yourself a quantum computer before you start this, honestly, is pretty darn good. So if you missed that episode, also be sure to check that out. But for this, honey agglomeratio, we are going to need honey bottles. Honey bottles, we can get in a couple of different ways, like just simply right-clicking a bottle on the hive works. But there's also another funny thing we can do. We can just get ourselves a jar from supplementaries, and we can make ourselves a faucet from supplementaries as well. And literally tap into this and then add a jar here. And since we have all of our honeycombs we're going to need, we can turn on the faucet, and this should just pull honey when it's available directly into the jar. Well, assuming that the bees start behaving and collecting pollen and going into hive and all that fun stuff. Also, something funny I'm noticing, like the bees must be creating more flowers around, because I didn't plant those flowers. They definitely planted those flowers. There were just random flowers popping up. Productive farming. This is new. Just a dye farm? But there we go. Now you can see that we do have some honey in the jar, and I don't know, can I right click? Yes, I can just simply right click the jar. And there we go. We get a honey bottle. And this, by the way, is automatic. It will fill this jar automatically as soon as honey is generated. And so there's my last bottle, and I can now make these honey seeds. Oh boy, look at that. We're getting back into mystical agriculture again. So yes, as soon as we have this, this is where bees, and from this particular mod, really is going to get jump started. Now, by the way, we are going to be using some tech today, and I am going to show you a little bit of SFM code that can automate productive bees effortlessly. And I use this in All the Mods 10, actually made it in All the Mods 10, but we are going to be reusing it here. I'm going to explain how everything works, break it all down so it's nice and easy and digestible, and we are going to put it to work. And it still works in this version. However, we don't have the same sort of mods, but we do at the same time. We have inner tanks and inner chests instead of dimensional chests and dimensional tanks. Man, I tell you what, this thing still works. It's beautiful, beautiful looking. We'll throw this over here, throw this here, and a seed is just made. Look how simple this is, just to have some basic setup. I mean, you don't even need anything crazy. Throw together some pipes and that thing is looking good. Usually I automate this and do it all wirelessly with like 4 or 5 modular routers, but yeah, I didn't really need it for this one. I just like trying new things every time I play. So anyways, back up to here. This is one of those things that don't really change too much because it's just so darn good. But now we are producing the honey essence. Oh, beautiful. By the way, if you're wondering what is all these particles, this is actually connected to a agronomic source link up here. And I actually now have it hooked in, and I did stop my connection that was flowing through here, but this is now just feeding everything. And just an agronomic source link sending to 1. This is sending to these 3 down here for any of our crafts. Hey, it's just gorgeous. Gorgeous. So now that I have all of that, well, this can disappear. You know, ignore what I'm doing here. You see absolutely nothing. So now in All the Mods 10 to the Sky, getting yourself villagers, because we do not have easy villagers, is a little bit harder. You would have to set up like a villager breeder, or do you need to? Well, possibly not. And we might actually be able to convert bees directly into villagers. And how? Well, that is by making yourself some polymorphic fluid by using the polymorphic catalyst and getting yourself an advanced polymorphic wand. And I recommend turning off the random polymorph and leaving targeted mode on, and then come over to a villager and you can shift right click and set the polymorph target to villager. This is a pretty cool thing. By the way, I think you can also right click on here to collect the polymorphic fluid. And we now have some of that stored inside of our tool. So what does this do? Well, this allows you to essentially convert mobs from one to another. So can we convert this into a villager, a bee, for example, by right-clicking? And the answer is yes. We just turned a bee into a fresh villager, and we can do this so long as we have polymorphic fluid and we have shift clicked onto a vanilla mob. Also, by the way, if you're wondering how do you get villagers in the first place, you can also do it this way. You can have it randomly switch the mobs over and over and over until you land on a villager, or you can use ours, which I think is one of the better ways to do it, and you can spawn in a island of the village, a tablet of Conjure Island Village right here, and it'll spawn an island. There'll be like 3 villagers on there, and you just need to grab a villager, just like this. Now, I would like to use the Just Dire Things catchers, and they are pretty cool to be able to use, but I do find for villagers, you want to be a little bit more precise where you actually click them, so definitely store them in an imprisonment tool, just to make sure they're nice and imprisoned. And so I've taken my imprisoned villagers and I've put them to work. So I now have a spruce beehive here. I just use some iron bars to keep them in here, and I'm just doing some trades with them to get them all leveled up, because they do provide some really good things, these beekeepers, but it is a little bit higher in its unlocks, I will say. I mean, for example, these aren't too bad. You can just immediately trade for some advanced beehives and expansion boxes, which are pretty decent, and it does seem like it kind of randomizes what it gives you. This one is a jungle, and I think this one's... What's the chances of both of them being the same? I mean, it should give you a pretty rounded like option, where it'll be either jungle, oak, spruce, and I've seen just about all of those different types inside of here. It's funny though, because both of these have the jungle one. I mean, I don't really need these, but I am leveling them up. And voila, that's the things we want. The sturdy bee cages. Now we can make regular bee cages, but the sturdy ones last forever, which is a whole lot better than the ones that break as soon as you use them. So yes, this is a great way to get yourself some sturdy bee cages. Now I do have some sturdy bee cages. I think I got those from Quest, but this is going to require honey blocks. This is a pretty decent recipe actually for crafting honey blocks. I'm going to go ahead and use that. That's going to make my system work a lot faster being able to craft them like that. Once these guys are sort of maxed out here, they will offer you a bee nest. So you can like buy the regular vanilla one, which is pretty nice, but I showed you a way that you can actually get them yourself. So now I've done a little bit of work to the area back here, and I've enclosed some of the walls, and I think what these side rooms are going to be is for centrifuges, because we are probably going to need more than one centrifuge in this case, because we can't tick accelerate. And so I've decided to cover these walls so they are totally different and not super punchy like the outside, to kind of better fit the bee theme that we're going to be going for inside of the bee room. And honestly, there should be plenty of space for these bees. Now, as far as texturing goes, I want to try and use some birch all the way up to about here, because I think I'm going to adorn the top section with something nice. But yeah, this looks super ugly. Disregard for right now. I'm going to stripe it like so, and then mass do that. Oh, that gives it a nice wallpaper look. This is pretty sick. Now for the floor, after working on this a little bit, I'm thinking cut quartz column blocks might actually look pretty good. And then we can also introduce a few other types of blocks in here as well that I think could complement this and also add some different looks. And once we get more honeycomb and stuff, we can definitely decorate this whole area with the honeycombs. And so now with some honeycomb blocks, since we can just craft those, I'm going to decorate some corners and make this definitely look like it's a place where we're going to be doing bees. And I couldn't leave the top like kind of hanging here dry. I decided to go ahead and set this up, and I can shear the bottom here. And this will actually stop these from growing any higher or lower. After all of that, I think this is a pretty nice looking area. I even decorated the outside here. I am going to get some teleporters that are going to allow me to teleport up to this location. That's going to go down into the base level, and also a way to get down to the base level. But here it is. So we can have some centrifuges in here. We can have a little bit of our infrastructure maybe up here on the walls. And then most of our hives are going to be contained within this area. And I'll manipulate this, of course, as needed. Now, with the room out of the way, I think it's time to start working on this mod. So there's a few things that we need to do to really get started into this mod. But the primary thing that we really want to get set up almost instantly is the ability to produce the draconic dust, because This is what's going to allow us to dive a little bit deeper into this mod. It's what's going to allow us to make these upgrades, which are going to be quite expensive, right? For example, like all of these upgrades start at a base productivity upgrade requiring draconic chunks, which need draconic dust. So we are going to need draconic combs, and draconic combs come from draconic bees, which they can just be found in the inn, by the way. To be able to get these bees, which we want to get set up by today, is going to require a obsidian nest, and we're also going to need dragon's breath. And thankfully we have quite a bit of dragon's breath. Now, to get an obsidian nest, we can quite literally make this thing. So this is going to summon these bees, and thankfully the simulator upgrades, which we're going to be putting in our bee hives, these aren't too bad. These are pretty simple for us to actually craft, and is going to be necessary for bees like these because we need to put them inside of a hive and we don't want them actually popping out like vanilla bees. So you know what? Let's go ahead and get started by creating our first bees, which is going to be the ender bees. The goal is to have all of the bees. Of course, that's how we're going to actually breed the bees, but I think these are the best ones to start with. And we do need dragon's breath, and I'm just using a dragon's head extractor to be able to get those dragon's breath. Just wanted to remind how I'm actually getting those. So let's head back to the end real quick. And all we have to do is feed this to it. And notice there's a timer here, and I just fed one to this. But what we should be able to do is feed multiple to it to accelerate it, or we can use something like, I don't know, the time wand to accelerate this. And we can get quite a bit more uses out of our singular bottles here by just having it constantly spawn them. Just like this. And we're going to need about 5 of them to at least get one set up right off the start, so we can fill an entire beehive. And this, my friends, is why getting the time wand set up before bees is really nice, because this just takes a while or a lot of these individual materials in order to get this, you know, in a reasonable amount of time. And now that we have this, let's get started with our actual beehives. So we are going to use an advanced beehive that's going to go on the bottom, and then we have an expansion box that goes on the top. And once you have this, you will see all of your upgrade slots and 5 bee slots and a slot for a bottle. And then this is the return inventory. So all of this is here, but before we put the bees in, we do want to get a few other things set up. So we are going to need that simulation upgrade. Before we put a single bee in here, we need to make sure that we have this inside of here. This will prevent the bees from like actually interacting with the world. And actually popping out into a physical entity. So once we have this, we get a new slot, and this is where we can actually put the bees into the beehive. And there we go. So all of the bees are going to be in here nice and cozy. And they are technically going to have the ability to work, but they won't work until we give them a feeding slab. So this is a very specific thing. It's a smooth slab with a chest underneath it. And we put this in front of it, but not directly in front of the hive. That'll actually block it from working. So it does need to go either 1 block lower than this, or not 1 block lower than it, but it needs to go either as a slab like this, or as the upper half of a slab. Just somewhere in the floor. Just don't block the front face of the beehive. That prevents bees from exiting and entering, even in the virtual sense. And these bees need something very specific. So if we look at this nest and we see what bee actually comes out of here, and we take a look at what it needs for its flower, it needs a dragon egg, like an actual dragon egg. So thankfully we can craft dragon eggs thanks to mystical agriculture. And we put this in here, and now these bees should start producing. But we can accelerate this. It's going to be pretty slow at first, but by using the time wand, you can see we can accelerate it, and we can make it go even faster too if we also use our time in the bottle. So pretty interesting. And this is why I was mentioning the time wand being such a powerful thing to get automated. Get it done before you do bees, and bees will be much simpler. Otherwise, this will quite literally be a waiting game. You will be waiting a very long time for a lot of things to happen. Look at that. We got ourselves some draconic combs. And now we need to start working towards getting ourselves the centrifuges. So these are going to require some speed upgrades, an inactive dragon egg, which we need to make the heated centrifuge. So already you can see we need these draconic chunks to even get this going. So to get to the good centrifuge, we need these bees. That's why I recommend these first. For right now, I'm just going to place my centrifuge over here. Just give it a little bit of power. This is not where they're going to permanently be, but it is going to let me kind of start working towards getting those higher tier ones. So I'm going to take all of the combs and I'm going to put them into the centrifuge. And already you can see this is dramatically slow. Does get faster whenever we get something like the speedier upgrades, but this does require the heart of the sea, which it looks like we need to automate Nautilus shells in some way. Ink sacs should be really easy. Looks like we just need a way to get Nautilus shells, and then crafting hearts of the sea is very, very straightforward. Now, automating this, pretty easy as well. We're going to throw in our combs. You can see they run into there, and then our product ends up over here, including some wax, which is not too bad. Now, it will build up honey. We don't actually have to worry about honey just yet, but later on, we probably want to put honey somewhere because there are combs that will process up and actually give a fluid byproduct that's not honey, and it gets voided if there's nowhere for it to go. So that will be something we can worry about later on. For right now, we can accelerate this, and we can also make the base speed upgrades, which we put 4 in there for now. And soon we'll be able to get ourselves some faster methods of doing this by putting, I think the speedier works inside of here. Now, what makes the other one faster than this one? Well, this one cannot actually produce material out of blocks from these combs. So if you have a comb block, this powered centrifuge can't process that. Now, I really want some Nautilus shells, so let's see. I think I can get into here real quick without taking any sort of damage. I want to grab this zombie that's inside the mob farm. There we go. I kind of love the shrink mod being able to do this. I can then pop this guy out, give him a little swab, so we definitely have this for future use, but the main thing I want to do is I want to capture this guy and drown him. So yes, technically what I want is I want to place water in here, and then I should also be able to place water up here. And then I want to summon the zombie in this position in here. Okay. And I think that is all I need to do, and just wait. And this guy is going to turn into a drowned. And we should be able to mob swab that drowned. Oh, I think it's happening. I see the shivering happening. And very, very soon. This is such a disturbing process. But yes, this is a way that you could easily get yourself a drowned. And now I've got it swapped. And so we can deep mob learner this guy, and we can actually make ourselves a model by making an egg and just spawning him over here and taking him out. Just put this fella in the deep mob learner after learning that. Yeah, and letting this thing rip. Before you know it, you're gonna have more more drown than you'll ever need. And now I've just thrown it in here. It's already self-aware because of how many I took out. I may have gotten a little carried away, and we just need a prediction from the drowned. And we say, hey, AE, just go ahead and start exporting those into here. And then we select Nautilus shells, and that's going to start sending those nonstop to our system. Now, with that out of the way, I can make Hearts of the Sea anytime I want, especially since we also automated Just Dire Things, which I love that this recipe uses Celestia gems from Just Dire Things, which, I mean, is blocks of diamonds to make. I mean, 3 of these is almost a guaranteed block of diamond. 4 is like sometimes a block of diamond, which is basically what this is, just way less Nautilus shells in this case. Okay, so we're at the point now where we should probably start thinking about automating this whole setup and getting it to these centrifuges, and then getting the products that we're generating into somewhere. So we can get them, for example, into a drawer. We can even set it up where we could have like a drawer controller, and all of our products are linked to that controller, which, I mean, the controller is downstairs. But we could, like, above each of the hive have a drawer that is above it that essentially goes, hey, this is what product I'm producing and how much I've produced of it. I think that could be pretty cool. We could even theme the drawer to fit in this room. But for this to take place, I would probably want a separate drawer controller, not the one that we've been using for everything else. No, this one I would actually want to be just related to bees alone. Now, underneath here, I went ahead and linked up a wireless applied energistics connector from Extended AE, so we now have access to our AE network. So yeah, hooking up to one of those controllers wouldn't be too difficult. We can even place the controller right down here. Just slip a range upgrade in here. We can grab our linking tool, or we can make 2 different linking tools. That actually might be a good idea. So we have a linking tool for our other network, and then we have this linking tool, which will be its own thing, right? And we can have 2 of them inside of our inventory. I would say name tag them, but I'm going to probably end up figuring out what the range is. But here we go. I mean, that looks like it's more than enough range, yeah, to encompass the whole area, just with a diamond upgrade. So now, first step of our automation is almost done. I mean, we essentially have a location to send not only items, but fluids immediately into a drawer network. And for every type of honeycomb that we produce, we will have a drawer that is on top of that hive that is going to correspond to the materials that it's generating. And if we need like a certain area for like fluids that are specific and completely different from its primary product, then we could have, I mean, I don't know, maybe we leave a 2-block gap, right? Or a 3-block gap in between. That way we can definitely have, like whenever we go to raise up higher, we can have our tanks. Like we can have one for items, and if it produces a fluid, might as well have a fluid, for example. So I'm thinking something like this. I mean, this looks pretty good. I actually used the expansion box check texture to kind of carry that through the whole thing. These are looking pretty good. Now, this SFM code you will find over on my Discord, by the way. It'll be pinned in the general chat. So be sure to check that out. It is in the top right hand. You can find the pins, open that up, and you should see this fresh SFM code. Now, I have modified this to work with our setup today from the All the Mods 10 one that I made. So if we go in here to edit, you'll be able to see this is where you need to paste in that code. Of course, after you have placed in a disk. So I've tried my best to label this to make it as easy to understand as possible, and I described everything. So this top section right here is going to pull items from the hive, and it's going to send to the controller, centrifuge, and gene box, and it's going to do some filtering in order to do that. And so the filtering that it's doing is actually looking for very specific letters and letter combinations inside of the item's name itself. So anything that has a log in its name, like if we use a lumber bee, will be pulled into the controller, which is exactly what we want to do. And then also you have comb, for example. Comb we want to send to the centrifuge. And these labels, by the way, don't have to be specific, but it is good to name them the block that you actually want to link it to, because we're going to be telling the SFM controller here what these actually mean in the future. So here in a second. Now, we also want to handle genes. This is for when we do any pokey things on these bees. We want to send genes to a gene box or our gene indexer. So I'm just going to label that gene. That's where we're going to send genes. Now, after this has finished, we move on into the next one. So this is going to pull items from the centrifuge and then send it to the controller. So after the items have processed from the first step, this is going to try to pull items from the centrifuge and then send all those items to the controller. That's going to be just fine. Then next, we want to pull the fluids from the controller or from the centrifuge, and we want to send that fluid to the controller because the controller can also handle fluids as well. So with all of this constantly running every 20 ticks, we should be more than fine with this setup. And like I said, you can find that over on the lovely Discord. So definitely be sure to check that out. And this is really clean. Now, what we're going to do is to get this to work, we have to use some inventory cables from SFM. We can use the fancy ones or we can use these. It really doesn't matter because most of these are going to be hidden anyways. And the ones that aren't hidden, well, we can camo these blocks. So these entire blocks can be completely camouflaged, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, under here, we want all of these cables, like I said, to be connected. So I want to make sure that all of them have some sort of pass-through connection. And just like this is actually passing through the wall onto the back side where we have some more inventory cables connected back here. These are going to be for the centrifuges, right? So essentially, we just need it attached directly to the beehive bottom part. And then anytime we go up, we can just continue that whole channel. If I break this, you can see we have access to these and we can just extend them and camo them and whatever we need for future levels. So, now I can take a deep breath because we're almost done, like surprisingly. So all I have to do now is essentially tell the SFM what all of these blocks actually do and where they're currently at. Now, also don't forget to connect it directly into the actual SFM machine itself, the block here, the factory manager, because this is how it actually communicates to the whole system. So now I have linked my storages here, and I've already placed in the items that, for example, these guys make. So almost every comb is going to produce honey. So we definitely want to store honey from the centrifuge. And we also want to store the wax that we do get. And so the wax is going to go here. And most of this will just be voided. We can put a void upgrade in here. We want to store a huge amount of it, but once it goes over, we definitely want to make sure to void it. And so let's go ahead and get our super factory manager set up. So we get our label gun. We just shift right click onto here. That is going to pull all of those variables that we assigned in this. And so we just need to click on here and select that this is the centrifuge. And then we click this again and we go, okay, well, what's the controller? Well, this is the controller. And it's as simple as this. And anytime we want to add something to something else, we can just simply add it. That's the cool part. So can I make a gene? And you know what? I want a barrel, right? So maybe we'll do a barrel for right now to handle the genes. And I could just have this placed like right here, for example. We can put it just right in the wall. Makes sense. And we'll call this, hey, we'll call this gene, right? So there's the gene. It's connected to the cable, so it'll place it in there. And then what's the last thing? Hive. Anytime we add a centrifuge or hive, we just literally need to click on it. Once we're done, we right click here and we just pushed it, not shift right click, but right click. We just pushed it and you notice all of the combs that would have been in here are gone. And then we open this up, all of the honey is gone. And you also notice that all of the products are being taken, sent into the controller, and then that controller will then store them inside of these blocks they're linked to. That is it. Anytime we add something new, by the way, we will just use the label gun. And after we get our drawers set up, it's as simple as that. Like, I'm not even kidding. And now to access all of this stuff from within our applied logistics system, just throw on a storage bus onto here. And on this, we can actually set a priority that's also high. So we'll set that to like a priority of 10 and we'll just connect that in. And the only thing this has access to are the drawers that already exist. And we will be able to access wax, as you can see right here, and also honey, which now shows up. And by the way, if you want to disguise your cables, just use a camo block. For example, I'm turning this camo block into the cut sandstone, and then I right click and it takes the position of that SFM cable. It's that simple. You know, doing that kind of makes me want to just like remove the barrel and place the barrel up here. By the way, the factory block itself also counts. So yeah, I can actually just move that there. And then on the label gun, we do want to go to gene and you right click again to remove. Make sure we're still selected and then you just re-push by holding right click and just right click on here. And we've re-pushed gene to this new barrel. So that's how you can actually change them. But I mean, that's it. You set your cables, you put your machines down now. All future stuff is just simply adding to this and just pushing to the SFM. And the SFM goes, hey, I see you've added new things here, and I am going to then send and route those items correctly. The only manual part is actually setting up the drawers. And yeah, that's not that hard either. Oh, and whenever you upgrade these to the next tiers and you start doing blocks, well, guess what is also in the name for the blocks? Comb. So they are still called comb blocks, so it will still actually carry the comb in their block form. Now, the only time you might want to add something to the SFM code is if there is a byproduct that is actually used here. So inside of this code, right now, it's taking from the hive and it's taking and sending those items that it gets to these locations. But there may be other items that you generate, and I do recommend possibly adding those to the list just by defining their name right here and then where you want to send them. For example, you can send them into the controller. Now, you know what? This has actually prompted me to modify this even further. So I'm actually going to remove the log section. And what I can do is I can run an accept. And so this is going to finish up after it sent combs to the centrifuge and it takes the genes and sends the genes to gene. It is then going to go, okay, output except, or everything else except for combs and gene to the controller. And so in this operation, it should just send everything else that gets produced directly to the controller. And this should work just fine. And so that right there is Productive Bees technically set up and ready to go for us. Now, things are going to get a little bit more interesting. I think next episode, we're going to be diving further into this mod. And this is just the start. And it seems kind of weird that I jumped immediately to the Ender Bees, but this allows us to make these upgrades and is the first step in actually making the productivity alpha upgrades. And we want to get to these upgrades very, very soon. We also want to be able to do comb blocks, and it's going to make bees actually viable as soon as we have access to those things. So yes, we need a little bit of the draconic dust before we can do all of that. So I do recommend starting it in this weird way, but it will turn out good if you do. So yes, next episode, I will be collecting all of the other bees. We'll start doing bee breeding and all kinds of other fun stuff. But today, I think this is a pretty good stopping point, and I hope you guys did learn something today. And whether that is how to set up some SFM stuff or how Productive Bees sort of works in the first place, I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought about today's episode and if this is something you enjoy. Of course, guys, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Give this video a huge thumbs up. And well, it's now time for me to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that amazing thanks is going to go out to Blind EXE. Thank you so much for your amazing support and choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and supporting my content in one of the best ways possible. You absolute boss. Thank you so very much, and getting access to the supporter servers, world downloads, and all kinds of other fun perks over on the Discord. Also, guys, be sure to check out and make sure you've clicked that notification button over here on YouTube so you don't miss future videos. And as always, thanks for watching.